Now, yesterday we learned about what is the shofar. The name of this Hasidic discourse says, on that day will be sounded a great shofar, and the lost people in the land of Ashur and the people who are pushed away in the land of Mitzrayim will bow down to God in the holy mountain in Jerusalem. Okay. So the Rebbe said, what do you have to have a shofar for? What do you have to have a big shofar for? How is that going to wake everybody up and bring everybody all together? So the Rebbe said, let's have a look, first of all, what's the whole idea of the creation of the world? God finished the creation of the world on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is when we sound the shofar. Rosh Hashanah is the day that man was created, the sixth day of creation. Up to that time, God created the whole thing on his own. He did the whole thing on his own. He revealed his amazing, miraculous power of creation in the world. Rosh Hashanah is called the head of the year. The head of the year, the head of this power of creation that God shows, that's Rosh Hashanah. Just like the head of a person, it controls his body. It's the source of life for the whole body. What a person thinks, that controls his whole being. A person's attitude, his axioms in life, his values, whatever he has in his head, that's what leads his whole body. That's what leads everything in it. And if a person, God forbid, is sick, something's wrong with his brain, so then it affects his body. He can't see, he can't. Same thing to Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the head of the year. It's the year that, so to speak, we have an effect on God's attitude. We arouse God to fix up the world, to make a different world, to make a better world. A person can ask, what do you mean? How can we affect God? So the answer to that is that's the whole entire reason God created the world, is that we'll have an effect on it. That's the basic, how do you say, motivation for God to create the world. He wanted to be a king. He wanted to create the world. Of course, now we're entering into realms which totally don't make any sense. But on the other hand, creation doesn't make any sense. The world doesn't make any sense. The fact that we live, the fact that we exist, the fact that we see, we have eyes, we have nose, we just take it for granted. Of course, what are you talking about? You have eyes, have nose, right? God forbid a child is born, he can't see. The parents will say, okay, so what? Everybody has to have eyes. What's the big deal? Eyes are everybody. So he's got a nose. A nose is good enough. Nobody says that. We take it for granted that people that are born have eyes, they have ears, they have nose, they have this. Why do we take it for granted? Why do we take? Because we're ingrates. We should be thanking God every moment for everything that we have, but we don't. Everything is a tremendous miracle. Makes no sense. Says the Rebbe, the biggest miracle is that we're created, not just that God creates us, but he creates us for a purpose. And the purpose that he creates us for is to do the impossible, to make this physical world, this physical creation, where God purposely concealed himself. And if you look in the books of Kabbalah, we see that he concealed himself millions and billions of levels of concealment, just in order to make this world so that we would have the possibility and the propensity to go against God, to forget about God, to not be aware of God. And nevertheless, to break through all of this and to do what God wants, that's above nature, in nature. To make the creator in the creation. When did this whole business start? Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, God created man. That's when everything flipped around. Up to Rosh Hashanah, God did everything on his own. On Rosh Hashanah, God put everything into the hands of man. That's what we learned here. Let's do. Okay. And that's why we say, Zayom Techilas Masachat. Today is the day of the beginning of your deeds. Why is it the beginning of your deeds? Because when God began to create the world back then, 5,780, in another month, 3 years ago, he did it from pure kindness, pure love. There was no man. God did it all on his own. Same thing as now. God is doing it from pure love, pure kindness. But there is pure kindness, but it's mixed in. It's mixed in with our service. Because in other words, God does it all on his own, but he nevertheless puts it all in our hands and he reacts to what we do. Let's just over here just 1 minute. And he reacts to what we do. So there's a mixing. This is the beginning of your deeds. Today is the beginning of your deeds. But it's just a remembrance for the first day back then. It's just a remembrance because back then, God did it all on his own. But now we also have to work together. So that's what it means. It's not exactly like the first day, because on the first day when God created the world, that's what it says. When God created the world, he did it from pure kindness, free gift, free love. God created the world back then on the first day. And after that, since then we've had 5,783 Rosh Hashanahs that we've had to decide what's going on. About 2,000 of those, there was no man to really serve God until Abraham came along. From Adam until Abraham was about 2,000 years, a little bit less than 2,000 years. So there was nobody really to serve God. There were individual tzaddikim in the world, that there was Metushelach, it says, and there was Chanoch, and there was Noach, of course, right? These were tzaddikim. But nevertheless, it was nothing like Adam, first man. And Adam messed it up a couple hours after he was created. Adam. So therefore, this is the day, the first day, it has this kindness that God expressed when he was creating the world back then on the first day. But it also has that we have to make God into a king. Omer lefanai malchus. Say in front of us sentences of kingship on Rosh Hashanah, so that I will rule over you. We have to say, there we go. Let's write this over here. 1 minute. Yeah. My pointer, my magic pointer. We have to say, we have to arouse God. We have to arouse God from an arousal from below. Until God becomes the level of malchut. God reveals his kingship in the world. And again, what's this kingship? That's the reason God created the world. He created the world so that he would be a king. Okay, now, like I said before, this doesn't make any sense, but that's the whole point of how do you say, Judaism, to remind the world of how insanely grateful we should be to the creator of the universe. Not just because he's creating us, that's enough to make us insanely grateful. But the fact that he's put the world in our hands, he's given us responsibility. And that responsibility is more valuable than anything. And the responsibility to make this world a perfect place, not to be selfish, not to think about going to heaven and about getting our own whatever is aggrandizing ourselves. Very difficult. You have to go against human nature. You have to go against nature in order to make the world a good place. That's the thing of Rosh Hashanah, and that's the thing of Shofar. We're going to talk about this, eventually get back to the Mashiach with the Shofar, sounding the Shofar. Okay, Beit. Hine, behold. Again, what are we learning for those of you who are tuning in and have never been to these classes before? We're learning from a book which is called Likuti Torah, which is a basic book of Hasidut Chabad. It was written about 250 years ago by the first Rebbe of Chabad. There are 7 Rebbes altogether. And his name was Rabbi Shneur Zalman. And he was the Mashiach of his generation. Mashiach of his generation. And these teachings we're learning are the teachings of Mashiach. The main function of Mashiach is education. Education. To educate the whole world, to fix everybody's head up. That's what Rosh Hashanah is. Rosh Hashanah means changing your head. Shana means to change, and Rosh means your head. Rosh Hashanah ideal is to change God's head, that we convince God to reveal himself, reveal more good, reveal more health, reveal more blessing, reveal more unity, more meaning, more harmony. We're trying to change God's head, so to speak. Rosh Hashanah. First of all, we have to change our head. Mashiach is going to be a king. He's going to reveal God's kingship in the world. A king isn't just somebody who sits up in a palace and has, people dancing in front of him and, jesters coming in and, bringing me another baked, bull or something, just sitting around having feasts all the time. God being a king means that God creates the world. And he creates not just this world, he creates all the worlds, all the angels, all of this. But only we can make him a king. The angels are automatic. They automatically, okay, so we're the ones that make God king. That's how God made the world. Like I said, it doesn't make any sense, but the whole world doesn't make any sense. And this is the motivation, if so to speak, of God to create the whole world. Okay, when God created the world, so what is the world? The world can be divided up into the two aspects of God. There's two aspects, which is called how God fills the world and how he surrounds the world. Perush, what does it mean? Mamali called me that God fills the world. This is the aspect of God we can appreciate. Hu achayas, this is the life force of mitlabesh, which is invested and clothed, ba'olamot in the worlds. Kafi midregosam, according to their level, kol echad v'echad, each and every one, lefum shiri delay, according to his measure. There are souls God creates. Neshamos kach, souls, they get their life like this. Malachim, angels, they get life like this. A cat has a different type of life than a dog, than a tree, than a rock. Different bodies. This is the aspect of God that everything in the world is different. Every atom is different, every molecule is different. Hu bechinas koach hapoel. This is what's called the power of creation, shemalubash banifa, which is clothed in the creation. The power of the creator, which is in the creation. Betoch omamish, inside of it. Ad shegam bagashmis, until even the physical world, ein lecha esav, there's no blade of grass. She'ein lo, blade of grass, whatever it's a plant. She'ein lo mazel, that hasn't got some spiritual force, a makebo, that hits it for omer lo gadol and tells it to grow. This is not the power of creation. This is not how God creating everything. This is how everything looks, how everything is different. How God makes everything different. Let's say it in a different way. How God enlivens everything. Okay, good. That's a little bit oversimplified, but this is how everything is different. Okay, let's use my favorite word, articulate. How God, so to speak, articulates himself. Every word of God creates something different. Every stone is different, every plant is different. And every soul which is inside of every plant and every stone and every animal is also different. That's a spiritual force which tells everything to grow. Shehu bechinas hamshachos achayos. This is drawing down life. Befrat la'esav zet, to this specific plant. Biyichud v'gavoa me'al gavoa, and it's higher and higher. Shomer u'gavoa aleim. There's levels which are above, which, so to speak, hover over higher levels, and then there's higher levels that hover over them, and etc. So it's something like in a human being, right? In order for you to move your toe, it's pretty simple. And animals can move their toes. What's the big deal? The process for a person to move is also an animal. From when it rises up in his will to move his toe until he actually moves his toe, the process is so tremendously complicated that if we would really think about it in depth, I don't think we would be able to move our toes. It's so incredibly complicated how it is that the will, which is in the soul, somehow affects the brain to think, and then it makes an impulse in the nerve, and it goes down into the spinal cord, and it breaks up into the muscle, and the muscle then pulls on a ligament, and the ligament then pulls on a bone, and the bone works in synchronization, whatever it is, together with the skin feeling, so that you actually feel that your toe is moving. And what I said is, of course, the most external, amateurish way of explaining it. But if you go to the whatever is, and somebody who knows anatomy, really knows anatomy, which I don't, so he'll explain to you how the nerves are so tremendously complicated, all these neurons and nerves and nerve centers and what are they called? I can't remember the names of them. And how they break up, and there's nodes and there's this, and incredibly complicated, right? How the spine works. Well, infinitely more complicated is how God can make let's say, a leaf fall off of a tree, right? The spiritual processes that occur from that actual leaf falling down. And first of all, there's the life force of the leaf, and that's how the life force is in this world. And then there's the world which is above the world of Yetzirah. And then there's the world of Yetzirah. Then there's above that the world of Bria. Then there's the different angels. That angel Michael has some sort of a part in the kindness of this thing. And then there's sub-angels and sub-angels and billions of angels and trillions of angels and quadrillion angels. And every single blade of grass has its own angel or force, which encourages it to grow, because it's life. These are life forces we're talking about. And each and every one of them according to his level. This is the level of life force from the Creator, which is put into this plant or whatever, in the levels of reality. The Chasiv, it says, it says that God has said, is hints at these different levels when he said that everything that is created for my glory, I have made it, I have formed it, I have also, actualized it. These are referring to, Lakavodi is referring to Atzilut, and this refers to Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. These are the three worlds, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. Ubefrat, and especially Kama, almost how many worlds there are, Uberuim, and creations, and Kates, Tachlis Mamash, without any end, really. It says, for instance, it says that the angel, take the angel Michael. So he's like the chief angel over God's kindness, how God's kindness comes down in the world of Bria or Yetzirah, whatever. And he has underneath him all these sub-angels, which that's genuinely expressed by what's called the 10 sfirot, the 10 aspects of the angel Mechoel. So angel Mechoel is kindness, and then there's within kindness these 10 different aspects, how kindness can be expressed, Chachma, Bina, Das. Now in each and every one of them, there's also 10 aspects. And in each one of those 10 aspects, there's also 10 sub-aspects. And one of those 10 aspects, there's sub-aspects. So you take, 10 to the infinite billionth power, and you have infinite numbers of angels. So it says, really, there's not infinite numbers of angels. There's it says, what is it? 10,000 angels in each group of angels. 10,000. Riva Ravavos. Riva Ravavos is 10,000. Maybe it's not, maybe it's 100 million. Oh, so 100 million angels in every group. So it's limited in every group, but the number of groups are unlimited. So Lukududav ein mispar. So we have, 100 million angels, a limited number in every group of angels, but there's an unlimited number of groups, and that's just in Mechoel, the angel Mechoel. Then we have, and each one of these is appointed on another, the atom or neuron or whatever you want to call it. So God is creating this whole entire incredible business. I mean, it's just the whole thing makes no sense whatsoever. But if you look at science, right, the name for something not making sense, right? There's a scientific name for things that don't make sense. What is that? Nature. Nature. That's what nature is. Nature means something that doesn't. That's the nature of a cow. Why does a cow go moo? Why doesn't a cow go meow? That's its nature, right? You can explain it. No, a cow's vocal cords are like this. Why are the cow's vocal cords, right? The laws of nature. Who made the laws of nature? Who passed the laws of nature? Where they come from? Nature. Nature doesn't make it. The whole thing makes no sense whatsoever. But on the other hand, it's incredibly orderly. That's what science is. Science discovers the order in creation. And you can even utilize this order in order to benefit the world. You can do the opposite also. But so this is, if so, the incredible miraculousness of the diversion of God's power. The koach habora malubash mamish is inside of each and every one. The fiarko. Now this we're talking about mamalikom. This is how God fills the worlds. Commercial, his chalkus ofen achayos, like the division of life, shenimshach mekoach hatzameach, which comes into the power, which comes into plant life. The kama meaning tzemachim. There's so many different types of plants. Sheba olam in the world, shonim zeh mizeh, different one from the other. This is called mamalikom. Where was I? In Panama, I think. They had this place where there were orchids. They grew orchids. There was like, I don't remember, something like 2,000 different types of orchids. 2,000 different types of orchids. This is black with a red spot, red with a black spot, with a line, with a this, right? My wife was interested up to about the number 100. I lost interest after about 10. But that's, you only saw 100. There's a 900 more. Look at this. What's wrong with you? You're not cultured. Who knows what? There's a big orchid with this that's purple, and there's a small orchid that's green, and there's a this and that. That's just orchids. You realize that's talking about. And they didn't collect all of them. That's only the Panamanian orchids. Then there's the orchids which come from Venezuela. Ooh, this is a whole different belt. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so there's so many different types of plant life. It's incomprehensible. This is what's called memalikom, diversion of sovev. But then there's another aspect of God, and that is, so to speak, the creator. Wow, everything is the same. Everything exists. Orchids exist, I exist, angels exist, rocks exist, spiritual levels exist. That's called soviv kolmin. God makes existence. How it's created, how it is diverse, articulated, one from the other, that's mamali kolmin. That's how God fills the world. But then there's another aspect of God, that God creates the whole business. The whole thing is like one big creation. Soviv kolmin hu orva chayas shalamayla mishtalshlis. This is a life force of God, which is above. One second. Sometimes this thing does not react. Which is above the creation, these labshus, and being clothed, ba'olamot, in the worlds. In regarding this level of godliness, which is above the worlds, Nehemiah says, Ani Hashem lo shiniti, I am God, I never changed. You're the same God before the world was created, and after the world was created. B'shava mamash, the same thing. Okay, now we have to remember over here, keep this in mind, that God is not a person, and he's not an angel, and he's not a force, and he's not an infinite force, and he's not an infinite being. God creates all the infinite forces and the infinite beings, and all the angels could be infinite. God is maybe the only way we can describe a little bit God, just say he's the creator. Anything you got, God creates it. The spiritual levels, God creates it. All these levels that all the other religions are made of, they're just creations of God. God creates everything. What does he create everything from? He creates everything from nothing. We've talked about this before. If so, what does it mean? It means that you're nothing. The world is nothing. Even I'm nothing. Everything is nothing. So who am I talking to if everything is nothing? Right. So the answer is because I'm also nothing. So you're nothing and I'm nothing and everything is nothing. So one second, this makes no sense. If everything is nothing, then why did you just do what you want to? Or do what you want to? There's no. what you want and everything is also nothing. So, I mean, this is just ridiculous. What do you mean everything is nothing? So the answer is everything. So how is everything here? Here we see there's the world. The Torah says God created the heavens and the earth. You want to tell us nothing? So no, the world was made from nothing and it's being made from nothing. So what is the world? It's a big miracle. Look around you. Everything that you see is a miracle. Everything. You see a table in front of you. You see a screen in front of you. Everything, your hand, your consciousness, everything is an incredible miracle being created every moment, brand new by God. Not only is it being created every moment brand new, every moment, time itself is a miracle, it's a creation. So if so, the world doesn't really exist at all. It's just this amazing miracle that God is bringing from nothing. So if the world is really nothing, it can't have an effect on God, that God is something. Okay, but we're talking here in semantics because it doesn't make, there is no way that a human being can conceive of what it means nothing. We are something. Everything that we see, everything we somehow or other base it on what our idea of reality is. Somehow or other. Spiritual reality, or if you're religious, spiritual reality, if you're practical, physical reality. But there's nothing at all. We have no idea what it means, nothing. We can't remember how we were before we were born. There's some people that claim they can remember their previous incarnations. But can you remember what you were before the whole universe was created? 5,783 almost years ago, there was nothing. There was no spirit. There was no vacuum. There was no space. There was no time. There was no... What was there? We have absolutely no idea. I mean, it's pure godliness. We have no idea what God is. So everything in the world is this incredible miracle. And that's what it means, that the world is so incredibly dependent on zero. It's made from nothing. So, and therefore, the world takes up no place by God. God is ultimate reality, but that does not devaluate the world. Exactly the opposite. That, how do you say, makes the world invaluable. God personally is creating every blade of grass, every animal, and how much more so every human being. So according to Judaism, every human being is infinitely precious to God. Nothing ever happens by accident, nothing. And no one is ever alone. God is personally with and intimately involved in every human being and every detail of every human being. But God also gave us free will, and we can mess the whole thing up if we want to. And God also gives tests. Okay, we'll talk about that later. Meanwhile, we're talking about here Rosh Hashanah. We decide the whole business. Rosh Hashanah, God said, I'm putting the whole things into your hands. What you do on Rosh Hashanah, that makes the new head. You'll make me a new head. How I create the world. Okay, now we're talking about the world. The world has two aspects of God. God creates the world in two aspects. One is called Mamalik Kolim, how he fills the world. That's everything is different from everything else. And then there's Soviv Kolim, how everything is exactly the same. It's all a creation, a miraculous creation, everything. A rock, a human, a Jew, a non-Jew, an animal, a star, an angel, the spiritual levels, heavens, whatever. It's all exactly the same thing to God. They're just creations from nothing. That's Soviv Kolim. Ella. So it says, that's what it means, I am God, I never changed. Says the Rebbe, what do you mean he never changed? I mean, God is creating the world all the time. How can it be that he doesn't change? He's doing something. He's changing. It must change somehow or other. He's speaking. It says in the Torah that God spoke. He spoke to Abraham. God's not changing. Here we change God's will. We change it. We sound the shofar. We pray and we change. What do you mean God never changes? Says the Rebbe, this is a very big mystery we're getting into now. Ella, but it's a mystery for me also. Ella, but almost because this ray of godliness that enlivens and creates all the worlds. Hirak is only Ha'orach Chitzonis. It's just an external ray of godliness from God's essence. The Eino Nagas Bo Kolol, and it doesn't touch on God's essence at all. The Eino Poel Shino, and it doesn't cause any change in God at all. Why? Ki Chayos Kolol, almost because the life of all the worlds, Urak is only like it says, Ana Emloch. God wants to rule. Shemiras Malchusa, the God's kingship, Bilvad, Mashahu Yisprech Nikra Melech, in addition to the fact that God is called a king, Umisnasa, and he is elevated, so to speak, on the worlds. Zeu Gufa, not only is God elevated on the worlds, but God, the fact that he's elevated above the worlds, this itself enlivens the worlds. But this aspect that God creates the worlds does not touch God's essence at all. You want to try to understand this a little bit. Now, what the Rebbe is not just giving his conception of how you should look at the world, and he's explaining reality. He is explaining what is reality. And this reality that he's explaining, the oneness of God, this is what the whole world will see and feel clearly every instant with Mashiach. That's the idea of Mashiach. That's why these teachings are the teachings of Mashiach. Everyone will see how precious every detail of life, this physical world is. And no one will think about going to heaven. No one, it won't concern anybody. It's God's business. Heaven, hell, that's God's business. Our business is this world. To make this world perfect, to make this world infinitely more godly than, or holy, or whatever you want to call it, than heaven. Why? Because in this world, we actually give God pleasure. We make God into a king. That's Judaism. And let's have an example. What are we saying? God creates the world all the time. He creates the world constantly from nothing. He creates every single detail, me, you, everything, all the time. And it has no effect on God whatsoever. No effect whatsoever. Why? Because the world doesn't really exist. God is creating it from nothing. The world is this incredible, incredible, incredible miracle, every detail. What's the world made from? From nothing. We have no idea what nothing means. But God is creating the world from nothing. And the reason he's doing it is because this world is very precious to God. Now, again, this is not a logical thing we're talking about. We're just talking about reality. Like I said before, the scientists have a name for things that are illogical, and it's called nature. Nature. The Rebbe is explaining to us what true nature is. A type of nature, reality that's totally incomprehensible. But the more we try to understand little bits of it, then we fulfill the commandment of loving God. Some people say the non-Jews are also commanded to love God. There's 7 Noahide commandments. Those are all mostly prohibitions. But they say that there's 30 positive commandments. They're not exactly the same thing as the commandments of the Jews, but nevertheless, it's a commandment from God himself, only one God, to love God. How do you love God? By thinking about these ideas. What is reality? That God is actually creating everything. But the fact is, God is not changed at all by creating the world. When a person speaks, he changes something, right? Time passes something. God does not change whatsoever. God is so incomprehensible, more real than we are, that we can't possibly grasp what God is. But the fact is his reality is totally unchangeable. Despite the fact that he's creating all the angels and he's creating me and you and creating everything constantly, God does not change. Kamashal Melech, just like a king. Basar Vadam, a physical king. Shu'u Mahut B'fnei he is in existence on his own. Umash Nikra Melech, and that which he is called a king over his kingdom. Hari Ein B'vechinazu, he's Pashtas Atzmuso Mamash. This is not God's essence at all. This is not the king himself, doesn't come out and say, build that road, knock down that tree, right, make this statue over there. The king doesn't come out. Rak Sheshemo, only his name is on him, a proclamation from his majesty. Everybody's shaking. Meanwhile, the king made the proclamation a long time ago, and he's sitting up. The Rebbe is just trying to give us a little bit of an example. Don't, God forbid, think that God is separate from the world and he's sitting up in his palace, and even though that is the narrative, simple, how do you say, external narrative of the Torah. God is one of the characters of the Bible, and he creates the Torah, and he talks to Abraham, and he gets this. So God is one character, and Abraham is another one, and Noah is another one. And which is true. God does have his desire and his will, and that's the Torah, and God did take us out of Egypt. But nevertheless, you want to come to love God. You're not going to come to love God because of what he did. He took the Jews out of Egypt 3,300 years ago, right? Maybe if you think about it a little bit, could be. But not what we're talking about. What is God doing right now that you can love him? What's valuable about God? It says, what's valuable about God? I'll tell you, he's creating you. He's creating me. When I think God is creating me right now, this is amazing. God is creating the heavens and the earth. I don't feel this, so you have to think about it. That's called hitbonenut. Says the Rebbe, this is something like, for instance, a king. When the king comes out, we don't have any kings today, but used to be the king would come out, right? King is out. He was in his, comes out in his, whatever it is, in his, on his royal horse or on his royal carriage, whatever it is. Everybody bows down. Everybody freaks out. This is the king. The king, with one word, he can say, wipe this whole city out. Give everybody in the crowd $1 million. The king can do anything he wants. When the king comes out, it says, but the king usually is sitting somewhere different. The king is a whole different type of a person. The same thing, God, so to speak, as God is creating the world, but he does it by a ray of his godliness, like the king's kingship. That's what rules over the world. When God revealed his essence, like on Mount Sinai, it says everybody's souls jumped out of their bodies. So the essence of the king doesn't go into the kingship. Raksh Shema, only his name is called on them. And that's what the rabbis say. Until the world was created, God and his name were alone. This word name is also the gematria of will, ratzon, same numerical value. But atzmus of God's essence is totally separated. And God's essence, this is called soviv kalmi. We'll see that there's a level which is higher than this, but that's what's called God surrounds the worlds. What he means it surrounds the worlds? That God is, this is the power of God's creation. How God creates, the tool of creation, that's what's called mamali kalmi. Sometimes it's called the name Elokim. And this soviv kalmi is called the name Yudke Vavke, Hashem. This is just different aspects. These are just different aspects of God. Lochi, and therefore Nikra Habriya, therefore the whole creation is called something from nothing. Why something from nothing? Perush. We started the class a little bit late today, so I'm going a little bit over. Usually the class ends, this class ends at 9, and the next one begins at 9:02 or something, but we started a little bit late. Yesh Perush Ki, because Ishtalshlis Ilava Olol, in the creation of the world, cause and effect. The cause is affected by its result. Right? What is it? Newton's principle? Every action is an equal reaction. You want something to move, so that thing you create, it takes some energy from you. Right? The action that you make as a reaction. Is that if God was a thing or a spiritual thing, then true, the world would have an effect on him. But the fact is that God creates the spiritual and he creates the physical and he creates it all from nothing. So the world is really nothing. It doesn't have an effect on God. This is impossible to understand, but it's a fact. But God's essence is totally removed. That's called soviv kalmi. Therefore, it's called a creation, something from nothing. What does it mean, something from nothing? The whole entire creation of the world, where the cause is affected by its result, that causes a change in it. And that causes a change in the cause. Like ishtalshlus, like for instance, a chain or something, a chain of, how do you say, reaction, a chain reaction from a person's brain to his intellect, to his emotions, from his emotions to his thought, to his thought to his speech and deed. Right? A person gets a concept. God really exists. It's a concept in his mind. From that, he thinks about it. It comes to his emotions. Oh, he's very emotional. I love God. From that, it comes to his thought. Right? Thought. His thoughts come totally changed. Right? Now he doesn't love money anymore. He wants money, but doesn't love. But he loves the creator of money. He loves the creator of people. He loves the creator. And from that, his speech is different. His thought is different. It's a whole chain. Mitlabesh midos, chain midos. The thoughts come into the thought. That's what's called memalikolmim. How God fills the worlds. There's spiritual levels. All the Kabbalah books talk about that. Spiritual worlds to lower spiritual worlds to lower spiritual worlds, till finally comes to this physical world of a yesh mi'ayin, that God creates the world something from nothing. Ain't okay, and it's not so. There's no chain, there's no system. Ela shechayos kol, almost the life of all the worlds that comes from God. Eino mimehuso vatzmuso kolal. The life force which is enlivening the world doesn't come from God's essence. It comes from a level of godliness which is called nothing. Ki midas malchuto, because God's kingship bilvad mechayotam enlivens all of the worlds. And that's called memalik, how God fills the worlds. This is the life force which fills the worlds. Okay, so we have two aspects of God. We have, so to speak, God's willpower, if you want to call it, and that creates everything equally. But how everything is created, right, that's a little bit different. Let's maybe have, I'll make up an example. Henry Ford, he decides, I don't know if this is historical correct, but let's say, he decides, I'm going to make automobile production. I'm going to make automobile. What does that mean? Automobile has four wheels. It has a motor on it, it has a steering wheel. There's some or other, they're all linked together. Car. Okay, that's the general idea. That enlivens the whole thing. That enlivens the whole factories that he makes and everything. That's the general life. Everything is the same. The wheels are the same. The steering wheel, the motor. It's all just part of this one idea that he had. Right? That's like Soviv Kolmin. That's how God surrounds the world. I have an idea. He wants to create a world. Now, how everything goes, what size the wheels are supposed to be, who's going to make the wheels, how are they going to be, which stage of the production line is it going to be, maybe they'll be bigger, maybe they'll smaller, what color, what this, those are all the details, what materials, what type of iron, what type of this, all that's the details. The same way, so to speak, this is a weak example. The world we see around us, we see all the diversity of the world. That's how God fills the world. This generally comes from the name Elohim. But the fact that the world exists, the fact that God wants to create it, that's a miracle that we can't possibly fathom. And that's God, so to speak, himself. Every Rosh Hashanah, that's what happened on the first Rosh Hashanah. What's Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah, only the Jewish people have this holiday. We celebrate the holiday when God created the world. Huh? You know when God created the world? Were you there? Is there a book? Well, there is a book. There's the Torah. And if you take the Torah and count the number of years, it says the years everybody lived, the Adam lived. So you come back to the conclusion that Adam was created, and he was created on the sixth day of creation. When was the sixth day of creation? And the sixth day of creation was Rosh Hashanah. That's when we Jewish people celebrate Rosh Hashanah. That's the day that man was created. And this year, it'll be another month, 5,783 years ago. Exactly. Every Rosh Hashanah, why do we have to know this? Because when man was created, God put the whole world into the hands of man. At the beginning, God did everything on his own. When man was created, every Rosh Hashanah there, we remind God, so to speak, and the Rebbe is reminding us, that God put the world in our hands, and we have to affect God. We have to influence God to be a king again. This is drawn down brand new. Every Rosh Hashanah is only drawn down one type of God's kingship, only for 1 year. And afterwards, after that year, Erev Rosh Hashanah, it says it goes back to its source. Very complicated process. It says that's the process where it says that God made man go to sleep, and he took a rib out from him and created a woman. That's the whole secret of Rosh Hashanah. That's the whole secret of Rosh Hashanah, it says. That the whole world, so to speak, goes to sleep before Rosh Hashanah starts. Goes to sleep, or the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, I'm sorry. It goes to sleep, and God makes a new world that takes a rib aside. And that's the idea of Rosh Hashanah, as we'll talk about, God willing, tomorrow. And like I said, today we started the class a little bit late, so we're finishing a little bit late. Now we're going to start a second class, which is from the Devar Malchut of the Rebbe. The world will be much higher than heaven. This physical world will be much higher than all the other heavens. What it means higher, we'll see. We'll see. Okay, now let's do the Devar Malchut. Good? Yes. Stay tuned in. Stay tuned in.